That's hard.
Okay,
That's hard.
we're live.
I want,
Okay,
oh, good.
right. We'll call the meeting to order then. Notice of the meeting has been published in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act and the requirements of the town of Kiowa Island. Keely, can we have a roll call?
I am doing the visual roll call, and
okay.
it looks like I need to take it off the agenda. It's my fault. It looks like we are all here.
Okay. Did anybody have any comments on any of the minutes? Excuse me.
Well, one, on, I think it was our last meeting minutes, it said that Mr. Hillstead had approved the minutes from the prior meeting. So since he wasn't there, I just thought it should be changed.
I see that. Okay.
Okay,
I apologize, Becky.
no problem.
It didn't
There's
seem
things
like.
we don't know about you, Becky.
Okay, can we, Keely, is it okay to approve them all at once?
Yeah.
Yes, just say what you're,
Yeah, could we have a motion to approve these 3 sets of minutes?
So move.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay. In terms of old business, I don't know if this is exactly old business, but I guess we should talk about the CSO proposal that Becky just circulated. Do you want to
Good.
take the lead,
Okay.
Becky?
Okay. Well, it took me a while to get the proposal from them. Even though after, I think it was our May meeting, I told them what we would offer. And we would love for them to do the Fourth Symphony. And we knew that would require extra musicians and preparation perhaps and so on. And that we could offer them an extra $12,000. And then we had some emails a little bit back and forth about they would need a bigger venue, and David had found out that we didn't have a bigger venue. So I let them know that. And at one point they wanted 14,000 extra. I said, no, I don't think that's why. But then just now that the CSO has announced what they're doing for next season, I figured they'd know more at this point. So within the last week, I've been communicating a little more and finally got that proposal today. And it's working within our additional $12,000 offer. And they say they can do a Mozart and the Fourth Symphony and a beginning number they haven't chosen yet. And it looks to me like on the proposal that they're talking about 39 musicians, which counts a timpani and several strings and other instruments. And they would have a guest artist, plus of course, Kent Lamb would conduct. And so that's what we know. Any questions?
Becky, how does it compare to the usual spring concert in terms of number at Holy Spirit?
Yeah, well, this year we were going to have them for, I believe it was 16,000, and they were proposing more musicians than usual, which I believe was 36. If anyone's got that proposal in front of them, I can look it up. And they were going to do some more like chamber music and not a whole symphony. They've never done a whole symphony for us in the spring concert. It's always been more of a chamber experience, chamber music experience. And I was really concerned that they might not be able to do this at the Holy Spirit. They were too at first, but now they say they can. And they really can't bring a whole lot more musicians, however. So they've got it worked out how they can do it. That's how, I don't know what else to say about a comparison.
I
The
was just thinking in
original
terms of,
proposal was 35 musicians.
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to know how many musicians we usually have at Holy Spirit with them in the like last year. Keely, do you remember?
Well, I would say my recollection is it's usually more like 30. Not
It's
much
less
less.
because the Holy Spirit setup is such that the musicians have trouble hearing musicians on the other side of them.
Mhm.
So they really and they can get around that somewhat by packing people together, but not in COVID. So yeah, I think this is likely to be the most we've ever seen at Holy Spirit.
I was talking to Bob Hill, who used to always handle their concerts, and especially the one at Holy Spirit. And I said, Bob, do you think this would work? And he said, yes, he did. He thought it would work. But of course, now we've got Ken's opinion and Kyle's opinion. And so somehow or other, they can make it work, they think.
Well, great. Any other comments from anybody or questions? So I think we have to vote on this, right, Keely? Well, I don't know. I mean, we voted on this idea, or did we not? We voted on the 16 and then we talked about this idea?
Yeah, I don't think we ever voted on this amount.
I don't either.
Okay,
No, I agree.
okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Well, that's wonderful. I think it's very exciting that we can be a part of their Beethoven season, even though somehow or other they're modifying it themselves. At least we can make our contribution to letting them play the fourth out of Kiowa.
Exactly. Well, thanks for working on that and getting the proposal in. I don't think we have anything else that I'm aware of on the rest of the calendar unless anybody else has something.
When is the date on that? Did they have,
March, on the proposal, March 14th. I think.
14.
what was that?
Hi,
Mark.
Dave.
The date, when did they put planning to do that?
March 14.
The question I have is, suppose there's no vaccine. Who's gonna show up? And how
Yes.
do we deal with that? Is we're gonna deal with it at all?
Well,
And
we certainly are going to deal with it. We are going to, I guess we can talk about it a little bit when we talk about the reopening plan, but yeah, we definitely are going to have to make a decision, not today, about whether we actually have these concerts, but we will need to make one this fall.
yeah, I'm
We'll
looking at,
talk about that a little bit with the reopening plan.
yeah, I don't, this is personal. I don't trust the government to come up with any brain that will allow this or things to happen the way they think they want it to happen. So I'm reading all sorts of stuff that the number of people that are going to die are going to double between now and October. And I just don't trust the government, our governor, to have enough I don't know what, to deal with these issues. So
But
I
don't
hope,
we deal with this concert bill in the same way we deal with all of them? It'll be,
yeah,
engage them all and make those determinations
Right.
based on the information we have at the time. There could be something that says it's safe, but that doesn't mean the Kiowa Arts Council has to
okay.
attend concerts. I mean, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's good if we make the final decision on some of these things. Because I don't leave it to our leaders to make that kind of decision.
No, I don't think we're going to go ahead just because a government official says that it's permissible. I think we need to decide based on our audience and our events and
Right, good.
our staff and our members. And I don't think we're in a position to make that yet. And I probably share your skepticism that we'll be in a position to do these concerts, but
Yeah,
for now, we're going to proceed until, the time comes to make that decision.
yeah, as long as we as an arts council are the final say and we don't have to cave into somebody up in Columbia that might not understand what's going on. So that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to new business. The first item on here is a planning timeline. We talked about the new process in our June meeting. I tried to put a little more detail in to, try to provide more guidance on how we thought the process would go. I mean, this is sort of my interpretation of how it would work, but obviously we all need to chime in. I think it's a little ambitious to think that we'll really be able to finish it January 7, but and I think we need to be flexible as we go along. But anyway, that's the item that's on the table. And I don't think it's different from what we talked about, but there's probably things in here that we didn't talk about in addition. Any comments on the planning timeline?
Other than to agree that I think it's a little, the final date is a little bit ambitious, the January 7th.
Yeah.
Because even if everything worked beautifully, that would still be during the holidays.
Yeah.
But I think, it's an outline and we just launch ourselves and dig in and see what happens.
Mhm. And adjust
Yeah.
as we
Yeah,
need to.
adjust accordingly, yeah.
Right, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
let's-
it's kind of good to be ambitious just so that we maybe get off to a good start and get moving and wait
Yeah.
until sort of the end of the process to start pulling things together.
The one positive thing is the cultural events application being earlier, which means we should have, before we wouldn't have a lot of that information until January. Having that information before, I think, will help a bunch of the events. We'll have a clearer idea of what people are looking for.
And I don't know who streamlined it, but wow, yay.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I don't know. I think it was a group effort.
Okay.
I will be also sending out a message to our anchor applicants for cultural events so they know. But I think it gives them a comfortable timeline to apply within.
okay.
Are you sending notices to past cultural events people, or
Yes,
who are you
so
sending?
That's what she,
sorry, it's hard for me to hear.
Who
I
are
have
you identifying as our
a
anchors?
list. So it would be Quentin, the ballet, CGO, CSO, Blues by the Sea. David Holt has applied for culture a few times. I Can't think of
Piccolo. Piccolo.
Piccolo.
Well,
Piccolo. Yes, Piccolo's on there.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, my volume was off. Did you say anyone besides Piccolo?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
But I think, Keely, when you're done, maybe you could just shoot around an email to the group, just letting us know who you contacted and of course, members who have relationships with, particular organizations that have done cultural events before, free to make sure they know and to follow up with them. I
Right.
think initially it's good to have one message go out and make sure it's prompt so that people aren't surprised. But those who have relationships, of course, can make sure that their applicants are aware and follow up with them as the deadline gets closer.
And I
Keely,
think
if you can
really-
get that wording to us, that would be great. And so if we do have some arts groups that we want to send the link to, we can be consistent in the language that we're saying.
Right.
Okay. We also, in the materials, we have the updated cultural events application.
mhm.
I don't know, any comments or thoughts on that?
That was me.
Okay.
I think you sent it out, right? That where it was. So it's always everything that's released from the town's posted under the news, but also we put it on the Arts Council page. So if you're talking with anybody, the easiest way to get them to it is the events tab on our home page so that they can access it there instead of having to weed through, maybe potentially 5 other messages that's come out after that. So the other thing is, Keely, you could, when we get towards like the deadline time, just send a reminder email to those organizations that you initially contact or have, applied or received funding in the past.
Maybe like mid-October.
Yeah, so because it's such a new way of doing it. So
It's a pretty easy application, but I did try to put more emphasis on the fact that y'all need to see or hear the people who are applying. But other than that, it's been simplified slightly.
Yeah, I think it was a good idea to synchronize these things and move it up a bit so we don't have everything coming in the door at the last minute and trying to organize it all. The reopening plan. I guess Keely and Stephanie has been putting this together and David has been forwarding materials he's gotten from other people. It is, of course, a work in progress and we'll have to keep evaluating the situations as we go along, both, the big question about whether to go forward and also the more detailed items in the reopening plan. I think this is a great start and a good framework for us to use at this point.
I've got questions about 2 of our events. In the past, they're both cultural events. Charleston Jazz Orchestra and Quentin have kept their ticket sales. Their planning has been dependent on having a certain number of tickets sold. And we're cutting down on the number of tickets sold. So I'm not sure how they can manage. We typically have 400 to 500 tickets sold for the Charleston Jazz Orchestra, and Quentin usually plans on 225 tickets sold, and the rest of them are our Arts Council receipts. But if I remember correctly, we've got Turtle Point set at 110 guests, 110 tickets. I'm not sure he can do it with that reduced revenue, and I'm not sure the CJO can do their concert with the reduced revenue.
But Judy, won't they be facing that wherever they perform?
Mhm.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
they will, but they may have to withdraw if they just can't do it.
Understood, but it's not that we're going to be unique in that respect.
Yeah,
Right, that's in the governor's current order that it has to
Right.
be 50% or less than 250.
well, one way that that Quentin and I were looking at it is we checked out the Turtle Point thing, and we were thinking in terms of getting rid of the tables, period, and putting it in rows with seats appropriately spaced. And we figured at that point we could do 200. Of course, that's, as I said, that doesn't go with the governor's figure. But I'm just not sure that, yeah, although they're facing this everywhere, they may not be able to do the concerts for us.
Well, what is
Haven't
the
checked with them.
official capacity for that room without tables?
It's gotta be higher.
It's got to
Yeah.
be higher.
So
I don't
we
know.
should find that out.
I can check with Barbara on that. And that's another question. Do people want to go to a jazz concert without tables? That's something for the Arts Council to determine. But I think Judy's absolutely right that any artist that's looking to collect their ticket revenue needs to see what we're talking about now in terms of capacity, to see if it's even feasible, and what is the number, and can we accommodate that number?
And the same thing for the CJO too, in a different venue. And again, the table question. And when I went through this, I was thinking, you know, I don't want to sit next to someone at a table. I would prefer to be in rows that with seats appropriately spaced. I feel that would be safer.
CGO, shouldn't be a problem because West Beach is so big.
Yeah.
The arrangement we can create there, we can check with Barbara on it, but I'm not sure, even though we said 300 in West Beach, there's a note on the plan that says we have lots of space for line management, makes sense. It's more for entrance and exit. I think.
There is a chance that the governor will still not allow over 250.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just, we can't
We don't
know.
have a choice, yeah.
That's right. And if it's at 250, that's, well, if he said, if it's a mandatory 250, it doesn't matter how many we can put in, but that's it. And actually, that's supposed to be our first event in January. And I am genuinely concerned about how we can manage a crowd, any size crowd, really. That's going to be a new venue, and people, we are not used to it. People are not used to it. It's going to be a challenge.
Absolutely.
It does have a very large vestibule or
Thank goodness.
space
That'll help.
that we
Yeah.
could put, like they do at the grocery store. We can put stickers on the floor or some kind of marks that when you come in, you have to space yourself 6 feet behind other people to check in. And I like the suggestions for checking in. They sounded reasonable. We're behind plastic and they drop their tickets in a basket or something. And as long as they're spaced out and they could get in early enough, I think it would work okay.
We are going to have to be trained ourselves, and we're going to have to train our audience.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, which one is in
January
chat?
15th, we'll be down
Is
there.
that? Excuse me.
It's Jazz, that's the CJO, Becky.
Oh,
And that's the first one that's on the 15th. And Judy's right, because that's the first one. It's the largest venue. It's the largest number that we're planning at this point. And we don't know what we don't know right now. So, and Barbara doesn't even know yet how the events over there are going to happen. And one of the things I talked to her about is maybe, once they have, a real event at the conference center, we could, I'm going to shadow it just to sort of, in my mask and just to figure out how they do it. But who knows when they're going to do it at this point.
So you don't know what might be on the calendar before January 15th. There.
Well, the calendar changes daily for them because they're getting cancellations. And,
Yeah.
So yeah, but and I got a note from her yesterday just because we don't even know. She has to relook at even the budget. You got the note I sent from her, Keely, about trying to figure out what the first event's going to cost, where that 6-month window is. Is it from now or is it from when we reserved it? Because they wiped everything out of the calendar. So she's got to talk to her bosses to figure out exactly if we do hold the January event, is the cost what we originally budgeted? Is it going to be less? So she's looking at that as well.
Right. I
Well,
haven't spoken to Judy yet.
another-
I inquired about that.
Another question is, we have usually had the CJO in the summer. Could we go back to having them in the summer if it appears that it just won't work in January? Do we know if they're available to August?
That's something we'd have to talk about with them. But if it's in the summer, it would be in the next year's
Well,
Arts
June.
Council calendar.
I guess it could be in June, right?
It could be
I don't
June.
think we have a venue in June
Yeah.
Yeah.
at this
Isn't
point.
it possible that we could find ourselves when we start working in our groups for next year, that as things are moving along, then we would propose who might have to be canceled this year into the next year? I mean, so that might be the case with the CJO.
Right.
We may have
Well-
very little planning to do. We may just duplicate the season we had
Yeah.
originally planned.
Right. Well, Brent and I have talked an awful lot about it, and we are both hesitant about being able to count on this. And I'm thinking, talking with Robert Lewis the other day, the new research that's come out about aerosol spraying and stuff. Nobody wants to sit in front of a trombone or a trumpet. And
Or a
so
singer.
they are having to do some
Or a singer,
real
yeah.
thinking about what is possible for them to do safely. And they're getting pressure on both sides of their the question. A number of these musicians have other jobs, so the CJO is not their bread and butter. But then, but there are the musicians in the CJO that music is their only job, and they are suffering. They don't have any work. So the CJO as an organization is getting pushed both ways about what are they going to do.
And we won't know until we get further along about whether we can do it.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
think the concern
Brent
of-
understands that. This is a commitment to do a concert if we can.
I do think we should figure out this money question, though.
Yes.
What the capacity of these 2 rooms are, and if the limit is 250, we'll just figure out what our limit is for these rooms, assuming we do theater style seating, and see what that number is, and get back to these organizations to let them know what the maximum number
Right.
we think we could do based on
So they can
current
plan.
guidance. Yeah.
Do we have any extra money in the budget if we could supplement a little bit more for these organizations that normally charge?
No,
A little bit more of the, no, you don't. Okay.
our budget is tight as a drum.
Okay.
It's really, Keely and Stephanie, chime in if you think otherwise, but I think even we really scratched to get where we are now. And things are pretty tight in terms of contingencies and assumptions about revenue and all that. I don't think we're in a position to count on spending any more money.
I do know that town council is going to relook at the budget as a whole in November. I have no idea if that looks better, I don't know if that'll trickle down to all of the things that were funded before, or if it will just hold. But I do know they have it on their November agenda. So.
And
Just to go,
Stephanie,
Gary,
we haven't
just-
really talked about the following season. Should we assume that we'll have funds like we had in the past? Is that the best working assumption?
I believe so.
Okay.
Just to go back to what Gary said before, so Judy, you'll check on what those minimum numbers are for these artists who are taking the gate, taking their own tickets, in terms of at what point do they say it's not worth it if it's 110 seats at Turtle Point?
I can do that and see what Quentin's the only one that we got that situation at Turtle Point. See what his ain't gonna do it point is.
Yeah.
And we need to find out from Barbara how many chairs we can put in their theater setting, and I'm talking about appropriately spaced too.
Yeah.
That's going to be important. That's going to be important to Quentin anyway. He's not working now. Except he's in his producing mode. He's producing a whole batch of CDs, but he's not traveling because he doesn't want to not be safe.
In some of our venues, in Turtle, for instance, if we didn't use tables, we would most likely need to put in the full complement of more chairs than we need, because we can't envision what groups are coming together and how they'll need to be spaced.
Yeah. We'll have to come up with a strategy. I was thinking in terms of putting them in groups of 2 and then having several of us in the room to assist people to put their chairs together, because actually, if you think about it, we're supposed to be 6 feet apart, except with the people we live with. So your best friend is not somebody you live with. So that best friend shouldn't be sitting next to you.
But sometimes children, if they come,
Right.
adult children even are. So it's kind of hard to
It is.
decide that ahead of time, other than like in a theater when you have seating that's permanent, and fixed.
So it's going to be interesting.
And
Gary,
it's
I
also
didn't know-
people in behind you and in front of you, like Davidson around the Newberry Theater plan, which is they've got seats empty along the rows, but behind the people who are will be seated, those are empty.
Right.
So
Right. Exactly. Or if you are thinking about Trump's press conference out there, they've got staggered rows.
Yeah, staggered rows. What about, I know we've never, to my knowledge, charged more than $25. Is that something that, in these circumstances would make sense to think about?
Quentin has mentioned more than a few times he would like to charge more than $25, and we have said no.
Yeah.
So I think this is in our court to consider that.
Well, I guess we need to know sort of, what the economics, the go, no go economics are
Right.
for both these groups. And then maybe we can think about different ways of meeting that. I don't know that I'm in favor of that, but I think it's certainly another possibility to deal with a revenue shortfall.
Right.
Anybody
That's
else?
a risk.
have
That's a risk. That's a risk too, because we don't,
Yes.
depending on where we are, they've got to guess at the number of tickets they're going to sell, given the risk of people not wanting to show up, especially on Kiowa. People are pretty careful, as Bill said, about where they're going and or where they will go. So.
Yep.
Although that last concert that we did was his, and those people did not seem to be worried at all about the virus. So.
Well, the last Quentin concert, we had a number of no-shows. and but Quentin was not unhappy about that because he had already had the ticket money.
Yeah.
Whether or not they showed.
But that was March, right?
That was
And then
March. That's
Yeah, it
about
was.
the reality of the situation hit us before we had, you know,
Yeah.
120,000 deaths. So.
yes.
Yeah.
Gary, I didn't know whether you were going to go through the plan in detail.
I wasn't planning on it, but I'm happy to talk to any, or, you know, any points that people want to raise.
And I think it's great. I think you've all done a wonderful job in you know, laying it out. I mean, it doesn't mean that the decisions are made or can be made at this point. But one thing I thought about him is that if there's a way in some venues to do pre-recorded introductions, and if not, do them from the back of the room rather than our standing up in front, you know, and because we know so much more now than we have known about the aerosols and the droplets and the distances. So that was one thing I thought we just might add.
Good idea.
Very good.
And the other thing about that, I believe it's either under other considerations or I don't know, but dismissal will be important. We'll have to think that through and possibly pre-record that as well. This table now.
Yes, right.
We might
Well,
have
we
table numbers or
possibly have sort of an usher system where somebody leads people in, because we have to figure out who's going to be able to sit close together and who isn't, and then stagger the next row and all that. We may need to do some ushering and then usher people out too.
My guess is we're going to have to decide ahead of time what seats can be occupied and what seats can't. So you might be a couple seats away from your friend.
Right.
Your spouse?
And, we'll have to put, well, no, I mean, you'd have two at a time, you know, would sit together.
That's
but
what I meant. But,
yeah.
You have to make a choice between your spouse and your friend.
Choose your friends carefully.
Yes.
Right.
you got to right now.
So, you know, this is a work in progress, and we'll keep looking with everything else that comes down the pike from other organizations. But I certainly encourage everybody to read through it and, you know, provide comments on things they think we should adjust or things we should think about. I think that would be really helpful. Okay. That's it for new business. We have any correspondence, Keely?
No.
Any committee members want to report on anything?
Oh, I wanted to mention with this pandemic, I have been getting hearing from Julian, you know, our pianist with the hair, and what he's been sequestered and everything, and he's been doing concerts over the air, which has been kind of nice. You know, he's done them from his home there in Paris, and you can see out the window, and then with his mother's home down in Italy. It's been kind of interesting. So these are some alternatives that perhaps we could pass on to other musicians.
There are a lot of things that are available streaming. I sent an email out today with several streaming possibilities, and those are free. But there are a number of other things. We saw a magnificent production of Madame Butterfly, and then the Berliner Philharmonic. You can join their organization, quote unquote, become a member, and you have access to all of their archives, and on and on and on. I think it's been wonderful. Julian Kaufman, who we considered having a few years ago and didn't He is doing some streaming, but Julian's sound is not good enough. That's a problem. They have to have a good enough sound and a good enough, good enough equipment, sound and video, to make it worthwhile.
You know,
It's-
you bring up a good point, Judy, because a lot of arts presenters are now looking at, we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know if
Right.
a vaccine is going to be available, you know, January or 6 months, a year. And so some groups, instead of just canceling, you know, and then trying to consider that, you know, we'll put it off 6 months, put it off 6 months, are looking at streaming events as a way to engage their patrons.
Right.
And some of them are paid. You know, you pay a pittance, but you can get some really interesting, good, professionally done streamed concerts. So something as we do planning, we might want to think about that as sort of a plan B in terms of providing some of those really cool events, theater, orchestra, whatever, to our Kiowa residents, using some of our budget money. And the costs for us would be also fairly minimal for some of that, as Judy mentioned.
Exactly. There are a number of towns. Most of them are, well, the ones with which I'm familiar are in New England, and they have Lincoln's. They routinely stream Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, and they put it up on their billboard outside their building. And everybody comes. It's bring your own bottle kind of thing, and see the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra for free. The live stream presentations of the Metropolitan Opera, that can be done for not too much money. So, I mean, we could change our whole horizon of what are able and are willing to do if we want to go along those routes. I love the live stream things. Jim and I watched a concert or something just about every evening, but I like live better.
And we all do, yeah.
But as you all know, or some of you know,
Just
This-
in that vein, to remind everybody, and I think Judy, you sent it out, that the symphony is doing their call and response concert for equality tonight at 9.
9.
Live streaming that, so,
Yeah.
and the
that
quality will be
That's
excellent.
for people who didn't get a chance to see it for the first time, or for total junkies who want to see it again, here's an opportunity.
but the other interesting thing is that they're doing, the CSO is doing some live stream concerts this fall that will be part of their subscription season. And I think there are 2. And so definitely they're charging for it. And it will be, I'm considering buying some new speakers for my computer if I'm going to listen to these things. We've
Well,
already,
you've already paid for it as a subscriber,
yeah,
yeah.
many of
And
us
they're-
left our subscription money with them. And so obviously we're going to see it on online.
And
you
they're
can-
planning lots of fun things before and after, pre and post concert talks and wine with the maestro. Just really, I just got off a call before I got on this one of things that the idea is to delight our patrons.
Mhm.
And
I
if
think
you want-
everybody's struggling with that.
If you want a good experience, what we do is we put it up on a computer, and then we mirror it to our big screen TV with the speakers
Yeah,
and
you can-
everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good experience.
But
Mhm.
back to, I think, the point David was making, you know, the longer this goes on, the
Yeah.
more we might really consider, you know, thinking of some sort of live streaming. And live streaming is getting so much better. People
It
use
is.
Right.
video. And I was talking with Bob Hill the other day and saying, you know, what Judy was saying, it's just so sad not to be able to go to live concerts. And he was saying, you know, the streaming is getting so good and it's so wonderful. You know, when somebody plays that solo, it zooms in on them.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's it's okay. It's what we have now, and it's
In
not
fact,
that-
my husband prefers it because he says
well, I guess
he's in the comfort of his chair and he's got a better seat than he could ever get in any auditorium. So,
Yeah. But for us, I guess it's a matter of kind of having a point on our planning schedule that we begin to think about now, given, how life looks at that time.
I think that's between what David has said and how many of us, if the vaccine is not available in a year from now, how many of us are willing to go to an event and run the event? And I think the idea of the streaming would be a real interesting way. But I think if we're gonna do that, we should think about it a little bit more, maybe about how that might work for us. Because for me, I would, if without getting a vaccine and it's gonna work, I would not want to get involved in the middle of all these people.
Right.
I'm too old for that, so, unfortunately.
You want to get older.
Yes.
yeah,
Is what being discussed here providing access to stream concerts that other people are doing, or streaming our own?
Our own would be interesting.
both.
All the above.
But both, I think. I think,
Yeah.
seeing what's available as well as possibly doing.
Yeah.
What we're going
Does
to need is
anybody have any idea what kind of equipment that would take to
Well,
do?
I don't think we'd have to do the technological part of it. I think the organization like the CJO or the CSO are already
Right.
doing some of that, and they would have to do it for
But-
us. And
but-
it's very tricky, I understand, to get the musicians in their own venues, their own homes, and coordinate them playing together, but they can do it. And it's being done better and better and better.
But
So
what-
if they were willing to do it, then that's what we could do, I
What we
guess.
would need to do is we would need to have the venue. We would need to have the big screen TV, or the Jumbotron or whatever it is. And we would have to have the speakers, so we'd have a good sound. So we would have, there's equipment that would be needed to project it, the event that we would have to provide. Now, maybe we could rent it. I don't know. Or
Wait,
maybe we might have to buy it.
That sounds like a
Beyond that, you
concert.
bring it to
Yeah.
people in their homes.
Yeah.
They don't have to go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah,
we would just provide access to it.
To a link.
We would pay them to produce it, and
Right.
we would present it through our
Yeah.
channels.
Okay.
Kiowa
Um,
Arts
Right.
Council channel.
Right, you got it.
um,
So looking ahead, all right, Conrad Tao.
Yep.
Don't know what life is going to be like in April, and I would, love to think it's going to be okay. I don't know that. The more it goes on, the longer I'm thinking it's going to be a year for us. So perhaps he has a venue where he could go, and we could again pay for the production and have that live streamed, and our audience could have that link and watch it in the comfort of their own home.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
I've seen quite a few from Carnegie Hall that they've been producing quite a few. And they've been individual musicians, or they've been a trio or a quartet, and it's been coordinated, but they're in their own homes. And
somebody saw
so-
the Sondheim tribute that
Yes.
was on a few months ago, which was really fabulous. Some really good home produced music.
okay. Question about the feasibility of this. Does anyone know whether this would cost less or cost more?
Not a clue.
Not a clue.
Because right now we are basing some of this around ticket revenue.
Right.
Do we think people would pay to watch these, or do we think they would be slightly cheaper and we wouldn't need that revenue?
I don't think I think they'd have to be free, Keely, would be my thinking. I think it'd be tough for people to pay But I think the cost would be less because there'd be no travel involved. I mean, think of what the artist is saving in terms of, and agents are beginning to think about this too. As you start talking to your agents, you can start discussing this and seeing what they're planning, because I think several are planning to do this sort of thing live from, a particular venue that they can sell to a number of presenters at a much cheaper price than a live event.
Would we allow them to sell it to other people? Maybe we get first run. And that's a way we could bring the cost down slightly.
Sure.
But we have actually paid to attend a couple of events online. A kind of a full price ticket even. I don't know if it was like $30 a person or 60 or what it was. But it was something we really wanted to see, and we did it, and we enjoyed it. I can't remember what it was right now, if it was Carnegie Hall or Spoleto or anyway.
The only reason I'm saying it's tough because you'd have to give everyone a password. What Keely is referring to, it's a little tough in terms of security. People can pass the it's just a little tougher if we're charging money to our patrons to see a live stream event. I mean, if an artist is doing it and handling that, and we're paying the money for it as a group, it's easier.
It'd be a learning experience.
Yeah.
Well, I know a couple of agents who are doing this sort of thing. And they're putting out limited things now. I'll check with them and see what I can learn.
That's a good idea.
At some point, we ought to just get down all the questions.
Okay. Anything else?
No, the other thing, think about having a lot more local people where maybe it'd be easier for us to deal with performers that were local rather than other places where they would be more difficult for communication possibilities. So that's another thing, is locally could that be done easier than, like Quentin could maybe do more local people rather than having him bring in people from other places to perform, or that might work a little bit easier for us to think about.
Are we still talking about streaming, or are we talking about something else?
Streaming, yep. If that's easier. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be helpful, Judy, if you find out what other people are doing. It seems like our next decision at some point will be whether, we can go forward in the winter, and maybe it seems hard to know. I personally think it'll be hard for us to be able to predict what the future will look like until we get through the spring and we see whether there is a vaccine, whether it's effective, and so on.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's feasible for us to, rearrange the whole way we do things until that is a little clearer.
Yeah. Well, Gary, are we going to talk about our groups and how we're going to get that moving forward today, or are we going to wait till September?
Well, so the groups we have set up based on preferences, and this planning timeline that I sent along describes how we think the process will work. So at our next meeting, we'll set out the guidelines for budget, number of events per group, which will, I think, essentially be historically based, and then people should get started within their groups talking about proposals. one point we talked about doing breakout groups after meetings. Who knows when we're actually going to have a real in-person meeting anyway, but it doesn't seem to me that feasible to do in connection with a regular meeting, just because we have, most people are on at least 3 groups, so I don't know how you all break out and you have to break into pieces your individual. Anyway, but the planning timeline was intended to sort of not dictate, but at least suggest how this process would go. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, Becky, but that was kind of my thought on
I
how
did.
we would go.
I look at, uh-huh.
Are there things you want to talk about that aren't discussed in it?
Well, I was wondering if each group is going to have a chairperson to call meetings of that group or discussions or whatever. And I guess if we're going to start in September, we need to start thinking ahead of time. I've never thought this far ahead of time about proposals, but about ideas for who I might propose. So I was, wondering if we should be doing that as well.
Yeah, I think we should, as far as, I guess we're not going to call them chair people because we don't want these things, to be committees, which would subject them to a lot of rigmarole. But I think I personally think it's helpful to have someone at least who's kind of a clearinghouse for stuff and reminding people of deadlines. But I think each group should decide that on their own. I do think the calendar is moved up a bit, so we should start thinking sooner. And I agree with, I think it was Jody who earlier said, we approved a lot of people that we were excited about. We canceled half of them. So for many groups, that approved list may well be a starting point for discussion about next year. But yeah, I think we do want to front load the process more than it has been before. But I'm certainly encouraged anybody to provide comments about the suggested timeline and how we suggest it work. And it is a work in progress, and I'm excited about it. I think it's going to work well, but it will do so only if people are committed to it and engage with it early on.
Gary, I may have mentioned this before, but I think it may be. I agree with you that they shouldn't have chairs. Maybe you just appoint a first convener, someone who at least can get the groups together.
Yeah, or a secretary or something.
And then at the first meeting, you decide when you're going to do the second meeting,
and I think so.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that we're going to be meeting by Zoom for a while.
Yeah, in terms of our regular meetings, I am respectful of Judy's comments early on that we don't really probably need a ton of meetings and don't want a ton of meetings, Zoom or otherwise. So hopefully we can communicate, with email and so on. But I don't see any reason for anybody to be meeting in person at this point, that's for sure. Do we want to decide today as a group that each working group should have, we'll call it a secretary, and then see if we get volunteers for each of the groups, and if not, the groups will figure out a process to select somebody? Does that seem like a good idea?
I'd be fine with you just appointing arbitrarily, because it might just be easier. I don't think we have, and I don't think we don't have a problem.
How do people feel about Gary arbitrarily appointing people?
That sounds good.
Right.
None of us is going to volunteer.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Richard's not here, so let's make him in charge.
In the spirit of just time management, I think.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll send out the appointments. for the volunteers shortly.
Maybe you better ask first. Send them out. But I wouldn't mind facilitating one of them. If
Yeah,
you
this
need.
is not gonna, this is supposed to be a team exercise, and it's
Yeah.
supposed to be everybody participating. It's not supposed to be one person shouldering a new burden. And hopefully it's really more about us doing what we did before, but in a more coordinated way, and maybe in a earlier than we had done it before. But talking to each other so we don't end up with a lot of duplication and or disappointment when everybody hates your ideas and so on. So, okay. With that, I think we can adjourn. Unless, is there anything else anybody wants to talk about?
I think
Dan,
it-
Congratulations
welcome.
to
And
Julie.
I wanted to welcome Van back. It's good to see you.
It is good to see.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you better stop
Have you
practicing
back, man.
guitar.
Talking to me again. I think you better give that up.
And
All
congratulations.
right.
Really?
How about have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.